Are you ready for another story from the Bible? This one comes from the Old Testament. It's about the prophet Elisha, who followed Elijah. Elisha was well known at this time, and he had a company of people who were learning from him as students. He called them the company of the prophets. So this is how the story begins. A woman who was the wife of one of the men of the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, "My husband, one of your followers, has died, and you know that he was a man who loved and followed God. But one of the men to whom he owed money is now coming to me and saying, 'I need to have your 2 sons as slaves in payment for your husband's debt.' Then Elisha said to the woman, 'What do you want me to do? What do you have in your house?' And the woman said, 'There's nothing in my house.' 'Well, nothing except a little bit of oil.' And Elisha said to the woman, 'This is what you need to do. You need to go to all of your neighbors and ask them if you can borrow jars. Don't ask for just a few. Get as many as you possibly can. And then when you have all the jars, go back to your home, and you and your sons go inside with all the jars, and then close the door behind you. And then pour your oil into one pot after another until all the pots are filled.' So the women went and borrowed pots and brought them back and put all the jars inside her house and closed the door with their 2 sons inside, just like the prophet Elisha had said. Then one son took a jar and put it in front of her, and she started pouring oil. And as she kept pouring, the one son moved the jar away, and the other son moved another jar underneath, and she kept on pouring. And she kept on pouring, and they changed jars and changed jars. And finally she said, "Give me another pot." And her son said, "Mom, there aren't any more pots left." Then the oil stopped. So the woman went and talked to the man of God and told him exactly what had happened. He said, "Take the oil that you have to the market and sell it. Then take the money you get from selling the oil and pay the man you owe the debt to. Then you and your sons can live on what is left." That's the end of today's story. So are you ready to step back through that story to see if you remember all the details? Who are the characters in this story? What happened first? What did the woman say to Elisha? What did Elisha say back to the woman? Did the woman do what Elisha suggested she do? When she came back to the house, did they just walk in, or was there something special? What happened inside the house? When they finished filling the first pot, what did the second son do? . When they were filling the last pot, what did the woman ask for? When her son said there wasn't any more, what happened to the oil? So what did the woman do then? What did Elisha tell the woman to do? What did you like about this story? What did you find was confusing or objectionable about this story? What did this story tell you about God? What did the story tell you about human beings? How do you want to change yourself on the inside because of what you heard in this story? What will you do because of what you heard in this story, doing outwardly? And who do you know who would really benefit from hearing this story told by you? What impressed you about that story? How do you think the widow felt about God at the beginning of this story? The widow started out with saying she had nothing. Why didn't she think she had anything? The widow started out saying that she had nothing. Why do you think God, through Elisha, chose to help the widow with something she had in her house already? How do you think the widow felt when she was begging her neighbors for the use of jars? Why might she have been afraid to tell her neighbors exactly why she wanted the jars? Why did Elisha say, "Shut the door and shut up your house with your boys inside"? How do you think the widow felt when she started pouring her little bit of oil into the first big jar? Why did the oil stop flowing when there were no more jars? How did the widow's relationship with God at the end of the story compare with her relationship with God at the beginning? What applications did you see for yourself in this story? When things are going badly, how do you feel about God? What do you already have God might use to help you and those around you? The widow may have been embarrassed when she approached her neighbors. When have you been too embarrassed to do what you knew what God wanted you to do? God amazed the widow. How would you feel if you saw God work as powerfully as he did in this story? How can your relationship with God be more like the relationship the widow had at the end of this story? What did you learn about God from this story? What are you going to do differently because of what you learned about yourself? Who might benefit greatly if you told them this story this week?